So Andrew, fantastic. Thank you for joining us. I hear you're back. If we had any question around if the world was open, you're testing things out for us and have done some traveling in the past few days, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, I'm out there again. I've been in the UK for a while. I was actually running away from lockdowns for as long as I could. Ended up in the UK, got back to Canada, and now I'm down in DC today, meeting friends and colleagues. And no, it's fantastic to get out there, and it's really energizing and exciting again.
Love it, love it, love it. We certainly appreciate it. And for all those that don't know, Andrew, CEO, DHGE, Dignity Health Global Health Education. Antoine, one of the co-founders of the Advancement League. Our two organizations have a partnership. We strongly believe in DHGE and in all of the fantastic things that they're doing, and they are committed to continuing to provide resources, education, and content expertise to all of our members and our growing community. So certainly happy to have you here, Andrew. It's a pleasure. We always talk about the importance of varying perspectives, varying industries, and certainly you are a clear living example of that. So I'll kick it over to you. Just a quick introduction, all of the places you've lived, worked in, kind of wow us and how much we need to really step our game up from our passports.
Well, I don't know about wowing you, but I've been fortunate, that's for sure. So I'm obviously British by birth. I grew up there, went to university there as well. But when I graduated from school, I found myself applying for jobs that I didn't want. So back in those days, it was a bit more difficult to travel and whatnot because the internet wasn't so prevalent, which obviously means I'm a bit older, sadly. But I went to live in South Korea to teach, and then Turkey and Italy. I've lived in the US and Canada. My whole career for 20 years has really revolved around education, both as a teacher, but then as an administrator, but now a CEO of a company. And globally, languages may be different, culture may be different, but the one common theme I've always found is that education and the value of it is overwhelming. And especially for us sitting in the Western world with our first world problems, I've done a lot of work in Asia, a lot of work in Africa, and when you see the impact and the necessity for education between literally life and death, in some cases, it's absolutely tremendous. And the fact now that I'm in the world of healthcare and education in that space, yet again, such an important area, so valuable, and actually has a genuine impact on communities, on outcomes, on equity. And so for me, have been it's been wonderful to live abroad and see the world, but actually doing impactful work has been the greatest thing for me.
Absolutely love that. So global perspective, and a number of these questions are directly from our members, and they took the gloves off. So first question out of the gate: best educational system that you've worked in, experienced, and why?
Yeah, so some really challenging questions, but this one was actually very easy, believe it or not. So very broad question, but in very simple terms. In Europe, but now in the UK, they have a system of what's called degree apprenticeships. And it's something I think very much needs to be embraced in the US. I'm a big believer in education for employment. Not in all cases, each to their own, but I believe in employment outcomes as a result of learning, especially in a country like the US where you can also incur a lot of debt. So in the UK, they have what's called degree apprenticeships. So typical university in England, I go to university for 3 years, like you guys go for 4 years for undergrad. I graduate, maybe I get a job, probably got some debt. We'll see how life goes. And also you're asking an 18-year-old to make difficult choices as well. So that's the traditional model as you would know it and I would know it for bachelor's learning. In the UK now, we have what's called a degree apprenticeship, which is where a student goes to an employer, let's say Deloitte, and he wants to be an accountant or she wants to be an accountant, and they do a degree apprenticeship. What that means is they do in England their degree for 4 years, or in America it would be 5 years, and they work at the same time. So they do 3 years in their with their employer, 3 days a week with their employer, and 2 days a week at their university. It's free. It's government subsidized through a taxation on those big companies, a very small payroll taxation, like 0.0 something percent. And when those people graduate, after a slightly longer time in school, they have no debt from a tuition perspective. What they've done with their beer money or whatever, that's a different question, right? But certainly no tuition debt. They've got 4 years work experience. And that's 4 years work experience on the competition. who are the other graduates who, but also they've got a career, they've got skills beyond academia. And I think that degree apprenticeship model is absolutely tremendous. It's very popular in Europe. In Switzerland, for example, more people do that route than a traditional route. And in your previous regime, you hear that under the Trump administration, no, I don't really comment on American politics, but it's certainly a unique administration. One thing they did talk a lot about was apprenticeships and degree apprenticeships and the American workforce. And I think that would be a very, very welcome addition to your education mix in this country. You guys still think of apprenticeships as a guy who fixes a boiler or a mechanic, or that's the commonly held view of it. I think very differently, and it's proven in other countries. And if you can get people working and studying at the same time and going towards careers, it's so good for your economy, so good for students, it's good for the companies, really a virtuous circle. So for me, that's one of certainly the best models I think that are in existence in terms of education.
Absolutely love that. And you hit it right on the head. That was going to be my first point of feedback is when we think of apprenticeships, we think of someone that fixes a roof or a plumber or an electrician. So I just love that you expanded our mindsets there. And that may be an opportunity for us to continue to collaborate, because I think we can potentially speed things up. And the more we
Well, interestingly, there is now funding from the federal government in the USA to do degree apprenticeships. However, employers and universities themselves have been quite slow on the uptake. I don't think that's through any lack of good faith. I just think it's through a lack of knowledge about it. And so that's a huge growth area. It would do very well here, especially when you think about discussions recently with infrastructure. Those people could work on your infrastructure projects and get a degree at the same time.
Spot on. Win-win. So more to come on that. So next question. COVID really put healthcare and school systems truly on the front page. In your perspective, what was one of the biggest wins of the pandemic that will positively impact both your students and educators everywhere?
So my world is more adult education. And obviously here at Dignity Health Global Education, DHGE, we focus on the workforce. So, not adults from 18 so much, but more so our average age students, kind of 30 to 40 in that range, maybe younger as well. But generally speaking, that what I found was a great's the wrong word, a positive outcome rather from that was that employers themselves recognize the need for digital platforms. And the reason why that's important, we have students who study we have a leadership academy with Duke University that we run with them. We build the programs with them. And we've had graduates from that academy in those programs in downtown LA, in Atlanta, in Dallas, but we've also had graduates from those programs in small towns, small rural communities, small desert communities, which have only critical access hospitals, those kind of things. So no matter if you're in downtown LA or in Globe in Arizona, which is an old mining town, you've had that consistency of quality between those two locations. And that's what digital platforms can provide. What they really provide is accessibility. And when you think about equity within education, the key to equity within education isn't just throwing money at it. The key to equity within education is access. If you don't get the access, you don't get the equity. And that's not to do with being, well, I'm overly simplifying it, but you can be a reasonably middle-class person, but if you don't have any access because of where you live, then it doesn't matter that you have more money. So education and quality of education should be a consistent thing across all states, for all communities, regardless of where they are, who they are, their gender, their race, no matter what they are. Accessibility is the key to equity. And employers recognizing that means that their staff can now be where they need to be, but access that education that will support their ongoing development. And for me, that's been the silver lining here, is that they've realized, wait a minute, these silly classes I do once a year in Las Vegas, where I'm really just going there to get drunk, that's not really achieving much. But if I actually have high quality education, all my staff regardless of location, can actually benefit. And I think that has been a positive outcome from the pandemic.
Huge win. We talk about the synergies between education and health. And I think access is the answer and has been the answer for us, And the blink of an eye, the pandemic forced us to figure out telemedicine, right? And that gave more individuals access to healthcare. So absolutely agree and love that answer, access. Speaking of access, YouTube is becoming a huge playground for education and almost like a free university for many. With the work that you all are doing, is this on your radar at the time? Any open thoughts there?
I have a lot of thoughts on that, actually. But I suppose the way to contextualize it is, I guess, okay, so Anton, do you have any children?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay, all right. So let's say then you're having your first child, which is a scary enough time anyway. You go to the hostel with your partner. She's about to pop. The midwife comes in and she tells you, oh, I've only ever given birth to the digital baby. I've only ever birthed the digital baby. You're not going to go, oh, that's okay. You're going to have concerns. And that's the core of that discussion. Edutainment, as I call it, is good fun and actually can be quite beneficial. I can learn to cook eggs on toast and learn that from Gordon Ramsay, and it can provide insight. It can make me think, and all those different things. But at its core, what you need is quality assurance. What you need is framework. What you need are learning outcomes. And so what I do believe in is inspiring stories. What I do believe is human interest stories. So we have a mini MBA, like a 12-week business program for clinicians moving into business practice. We do it with the University of Arizona. We realized that because of COVID, we had to do more than just talk about resiliency. So what we did is we've got teams of athletes, Super Bowl winners, world-class athletes came into that program and they spoke about their experience around motivation, how they get their mind strong, and all these different things. And we gave it a healthcare context. And the number one thing our students love is that bit of the program. But what it is it's got an entertainment human interest component mixed with real learning outcomes, real applicability, and real quality, which is underpinned by the work-based projects that we do. It's underpinned by the fact the University of Arizona are involved, etc. So YouTube is an edutainment tool, absolutely no problem with that. But as a free university as such, or a tool to rely on, I would have deep misgivings about that. And context is everything, and applicability is everything. And like that, though an extreme example, you don't want the midwife that birthed the digital baby. And so nurses, for example, can do a lot of didactic work online, which is fine, as long as it's done well. But then ultimately, at some point, they need to apply it to something, and that's where the practice comes in. So, yeah, but absolutely. A lot of people do think that YouTube or Masterclass and those things are these amazing learning platforms, but they're good entertainment platforms, not so much for learning itself.
Fantastic. And it's one of the things that stood out with you all, I guess, in our assessment, is that you all provide both education, the entertainment, and of course the applicability. And I think we're going to tag that term entertainment. I think that needs to be on the when we post this video, that needs to be the headline, because I absolutely love that. To your point, exposure is everything. And, you see the quotes, what you read, what you watch truly influences who you are. And almost many times it's hard to turn that off. So we vividly see how important education is to what a leader prioritizes and values. How do you all go about the topics and the sessions that you choose to teach, and even, how you decide to, land on who you partner with?
So there's two sides to that. There's the very practical side of how we develop that. And then there's also the decisions we make from a business point of view as to what we think people will be most interested in. So from the very practical side, we have healthcare systems who are our clients. We have leaders on our board. So for example, the chairman of the board I report to is the president of Common Spirit Health, which is the largest not-for-profit healthcare system in the US. So when he speaks about operations, I listen to what he says, you know. So, but beyond that, that feedback we get, we do a lot of focus groups. We do a lot of questionnaires. We do a lot of assessment on our current students and those kind of things. So that provides a lot of insight as well. And of course, we look at the landscape. Well, what are becoming more relevant topics? But, you know, beyond that, with schools, we also analyze schools that have strengths in areas. So let's say, for example, our Leadership Academy, we actually do with an entity within Duke called Duke CE. They're very, very well known for leadership. They teach Google, they teach Microsoft. And so when we wanted to develop leadership programs and co-develop them, which is what we do, they were a no-brainer. However, they're not so good for vocational entry-level positions within healthcare. So community health worker programs, you know, or medical assisting programs. So then we have a partner who is very aligned to dealing with that type of learner. So maybe they don't have the depth of academic background as someone at Duke, you know. So again, it's finding the right partner for the right project, and then, you know, and making sure that what we develop is suitable for the audience that are taking it. But when I come to the business side of it, I'm a big believer in this. Don't get the best person you can find in healthcare to do something. Get the best person in the world and contextualize it for healthcare. So, you know, I talk about the athletes that I just mentioned a minute ago. Well, if you want to talk about motivation and a mindset of winning and a mindset of achieving greatness, not many better people out there than an Olympic champion. There's not many better people out there than a two-time Super Bowl winner. But what you've got to do is control that. And then the context is healthcare. But they are the best in the world at the notion of greatness. So for me, what we do is we go and get groups and partners as well who are the best at what they do, and then we contextualize it. So again, we're currently working with one of the best acting schools in the world. Now you would say to me, Andrew, when does healthcare section with acting? Well, if you're talking about communication, there's a really good example. They breed actors who are great communicators, improv, difficult messaging, speaking to an audience, speaking to your workforce. So why get someone in healthcare who's pretty good at it? Why not go to the school that's the best in the world at it, and then take the fundamentals of what they do and then contextualize it for healthcare? So that's another important thing that we do. Don't learn from the best in one field, learn from the best in the world, and then give it context. We're big believers in that.
Fantastic. You know, you heard it from Andrew. You know, we've been screaming for about 3 years now that the future of health is together. And I think you just summarized exactly what we've been hoping to articulate, and that is we're going to learn and collaborate and figure out healthcare by collaborating with folks across the spectrum. So thank you for that. You know, one of the things that we're focused on as you think about social determinants of health, which have certainly become buzzwords, but underneath the marketing portion, we have some real opportunity here, is that of mental health. We have a cause team dedicated to mental health. Any suggestions on how we can partner with educators in schools, or even, you know, your actors and actresses to propel our efforts?
So I'm not an expert on that area, but I have, and it's very broad. That's the thing. Wellness, mindfulness, mental health, as you said, is a bit buzzy, and you know, a lot of companies to a certain extent have taken advantage of that. They've got a whole company on the notion of meditation, which I'm not against in any way, shape, or form. But it's such a broad issue, you know. So from a business perspective, I run a business, and I have two components to the community I serve primarily. I serve learners, but I also serve their employers. And I've got to see that from that point of view. So I've got to think about, you know, if I do very well by the system, I will inevitably have done very well by the staff member. Because if the staff people, if the people aren't happy, the system are not going to be happy. And, you know, if you know anything about healthcare, if people aren't happy, they'll certainly tell you. So in my business, we are looking at mindfulness and wellness within leadership courses. The new ones we're building are actually going to have those components in them. And we're engaged with a very strong partner at the moment about that. But the way they look at mindfulness and wellness is not from a home-based coping mechanism kind of approach. So like you think of headspace or calm or those kind of things. That's not the road we're going down. We're looking at wellness and mindfulness in regards to it as a performance issue. And the reason why that's interesting for us is because if I can give you the tools within your world to make you better at work, so I'm not trying to solve all your life problems. I can't do that, and that's not my job. But if I can, within the context of what you do at work, make your life easier, better, coping mechanisms within that environment, that will then make your employer happier as well, because you'll be more productive. So this isn't using mindfulness as a way to rinse the last dollar out of you to make you the most productive worker. But it's about giving you tools to cope within the setting, the environment you work in, that can make you more comfortable at work, more productive at work. And in fact, when people are more productive at work, when people feel they're coping more, when people are being more successful in their career, there is an undoubted connection to their wellness, to their mental health. But for me, there's also a connection to the benefits to their employer as well. And so, again, such a broad topic that, there's lots of that I wouldn't deal with, that I wouldn't even know the answer to. But I think to the question, I think it's really important that people narrow down about the community they're serving, but not just the benefit to a single individual. What's the benefit to all that can be derived by helping that single individual? So mental health issues in the United States, in particular, have often over the last few decades been a big issue because they've been underfunded. The fallacy in underfunding it, is actually, consequently, you're affecting the rest of the economy. Whilst if these people are more productive in the economy and have more support, in fact, everyone else would be happier too, because your economy would be stronger. So whether you take it in that grand, and I'm not overly simplifying it, I realize that, but if you take that sort of the world I live in, which is that kind of more corporate-y world, or society at large, there is a common sense in supporting that. But my advice to people there would be, you need to give it more context and think about how you serve people within the community they're based within. And if you can benefit both sides of that equation, the larger community will support that person, and that person will thrive more within that community. I mean, that makes sense.
Happiness all the way around it. What I'm hearing, if there's any message for our cause team, is that there's value in having extreme focus for such a broad topic, which you all have figured out. Extreme focus, narrowing it down, and from there, the right partners, the right opportunity, and potentially the right impact will arise. So we certainly appreciate that.
Impact is, I'm an education person by background. Universities, just as notionally at least, they measure things by impact. And so I think that way naturally. But if you can, and impact's a really hard thing sometimes to quantify. Mm-hmm. But if you can actually look at impact as a measurement in some way, it brings focus to you. It brings, I've got to get to that. And so that's very much the way I think about it.
Love that. So Andrew, we have a quick 3 questions. And again, these 3 are directly from our members. We appreciate the time. A few companies are now moving away from full college degree requirements and offering positions based on kind of short-term credentials, for passing a coding test. You used some examples earlier. Will that happen in more intensive roles such as nursing or hospital administration? We'll love your thoughts.
So in order to sort of keep my time, giving you too long an answer, in things like nursing, no, it won't change. But what you're going to need is more rounded nurses. So you will have to pass your exams and be a more traditionally qualified nurse. But what you're going to have is a nurse on a journey, a nurse on a pathway. So first of all, you're going to need more specialized nurses. So a nurse can do our RN to BSN, etc. But at some point, a lot more nurses need to qualify post-baccalaureate into OR nurses, OBGYN. The only way to combat and take on, community health is by having more specialist nurses to serve within those communities, which have their own individual needs. So you do need more specialized nurses. So that would be a post-baccalaureate option. And then, of course, if a nurse is moving into non-clinical areas, he or she might need a business credential, a finance credential, a lifelong journey of learning, which is following where they are in their career. So their core nursing degree will always exist, I believe, but the journey they go on as a nurse will, I believe, and should then become more nuanced and in that sort of more short-term credentialing space. That's how I view it for nurses.
We're seeing that in the industry for sure. So we agree with you there. Speaking of education, how often should someone be taking a course? Is this like a Netflix subscription future where every year your organization requires you to take a course and have a competency in something? Is this what lifelong learning means in your mind?
So in the context of healthcare, I really believe that people should be taking courses which align to, number one, either the career steps they've taken or about to take or aspire to take. So, again, if you're a clinician moving into the business world, there are lots of surgeons out there who are geniuses in the surgery field, but couldn't read a P&L to save their life, right? So, these micro-credentialing, lifelong learning steps in those ways, for me, make tremendous sense. And I really, really believe that. In this kind of Netflix ways described here, again, I'd put that in the same bucket as the kind of edutainment model that I described to you. And, anyone who tells you, in my mind, a subscription model of education is somehow rota learning or lifelong learning, you should be very wary of that person, because it means they don't understand education. So the greatest thing about lifelong learning should be two things. Number one, it applies to your life, at least in healthcare, at least, to your life. But number two is applied to what you do. So therefore, there's got to be applicability components. It's got to be relevant to your life, but also things like work-based projects and those kind of things are all ways that what you learn and what you do are connected. So I'm not so big on a Netflix model, though I'd love their income. I am more certainly aligned to the model of learning what you need to learn in a way that best suits you in terms of where you are in your life. And it should suit, your career path. Yeah.
Love that. Your journey, self-reflection, and thus, aligning your education to that. Yeah. Fantastic. So the big question, and part of the one of the perks of partnering with such a great organization like DHGE, and this is from our members, how can we get more involved in teaching? Our members often talk about how a lot of teaching is done in retirement, or post at the end of their career. We love to see immediate learning and immediate teaching opportunities. For example, negotiation is something that sticks out in that regard. A person asks, I'd rather hear from someone who just negotiated and doubled their salary rather than someone that did it at the front end of their career, which sometimes was 27 years ago.
Yeah, that's a good way to view it. I used to be a teacher myself, and teaching is great because it's like learning twice. That's a great thing about teaching, and a lot of people want to do it. People do it in retirement. We use facilitators in our program, instructors and mentors who coach the students weekly through work-based projects. Those people are either retired CEOs, retired chief nurse officers, or, to this question, current CEOs, current financial officers and those kinds of things. We use a mixture of both. The reason why I get more retired ones, frankly, is because, frankly, they have a bit more time, number one. But also, number two, they're not financially reliant on doing it. So we as an organization pay our facilitators and instructors, but they don't get into a heavy negotiation period with you because they actually want to do it. But to the point more clearly, I do think that kind of mentoring work of being one step ahead of the person you're teaching is really, really important. And it's something that we're mindful of in some of our programs that we have as well. That, there's applicability to what you're learning, and the person you're speaking to has very much done that. And anyone here who wants to get into teaching, I would actively encourage them. But the one thing I would say is that I used to be a languages teacher once upon a time. And people who say to me, oh, teaching languages is easy. I can speak English, so I can teach English. Okay, well, that's all right. Certainly not the case. And if you ask anyone a grammar question, you know what the answer will be, right? So, The other thing about teaching, of course, it is within itself a skill. It is in with itself a job. And actually, you tend to get better at it as your career goes because you do more of it by the nature of your job. So what I'd encourage people who are on the younger side of the spectrum, who may be part of your organization, is not to say don't teach, but if you want to use the word teach, get yourself a credential, in how to teach, because it's a skill within itself. But at the same time, the notion of mentoring and coaching and giving people that one-to-one feedback, well, that's different. You still need training for that, but that's different. And I would encourage all people who, who've done a bit in their career, which they think can give back, to absolutely do that. And I think there's a lot of organizations like ours, like others, who would take that on all day long. In fact, one of the reasons we teamed up with you was so we had a kind of breadth of, people we dealt with, from CEOs who are in their 60s to younger organizations like yourself, who give us that perspective as well. And perspective is really what I'm talking about. It's good to have both. But to the notion of teaching, that in itself is a skill. So anyone who wants to do that needs to realize that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Andrew, we're extremely grateful about the partnership. We love everything that DHG is doing. We know that our partnership will continue to flourish, and anybody that interacts or engages with our organizations will certainly reap the benefits. Appreciate the time. Wishing you safe travels back home, and we will keep the conversation and energy going.
Lovely. And thanks for your time as well today. Anyone who wants to learn more about us, we're at dhg.org, and feel free to look at our programs and reach out to us. And we're also happy to advise and support people as well in the options that they make. So it's been great to speak to you as well.
Awesome. Thank you.